Last week, Dan Pena did a seminar, and in that seminar during the day five, part one, he was kind enough to say some kind things about me. And what he said was that since he's began conducting his seminars in May of 1993, at which I was in attendance, the closest person he's seen to arrive with their head screwed on straight was me. He also said that I was born that way. And I certainly appreciate those comments. Dan and I have been partners for a long time, since 1994. I guess it was shortly after that first seminar, so 33 years since I met him. But I want to talk about whether I was born that way. And one of the things that is important, and I'm reading some notes here, I wanted to write down some things on this, is that the question about is somebody born that way or do they become that? And so I personally think that high performance people are not necessarily born that way, but that foundation can be built. So I want to first play what Dan said in that, and then I want to give you some practical suggestions, not only what he said, but a couple more that I would like to point out. So let's get to that clip.
The creating your own personal foundation is, in short sentences, is getting your head screwed on straight. Maybe one or two of you are close to having your head screwed on straight, but nobody in this room or any time the seminar has ever been given since May 1993 has had their screwed on straight. The closest we had to having their head screwed on straight was Bruce Whipple in May of 1993. You know, he was born that way. A little trivia about him. His I don't know how many great grandfathers signed the Declaration of Independence. So he comes from a line of the founding fathers. Okay. And he looks like a mortician, but I mean, and I've known him, 33 years. He's looked like a mortician since the day I met him. And we met at a J. Abraham seminar. And we both paid $5,000 to go to that J. Abraham seminar at the LA airport. Then we found out, we didn't know that they stacked the audience free so to make it look like it was full. So I don't know how many, we know we paid $5,000. We're not sure any of the other 400 or 500 paid $5,000. But, and then we found that out that, you bring, it's not like you're bringing homeless in from, the street, but, that's where we met. And we've been, on and off partners since that, shortly thereafter, on a handshake. We don't have a written agreement. Well, although I tell you, don't do that. Handshake deals, just like in the founder, are horseshit. Okay? And so you're going to paper it. Or as they say now, you're going to memorialize it. Okay. Okay. So how do you get your head screwed on straight? Well, to begin with, you are who you hang around with. In various questions that I asked you from day one, normally it's your mom, maybe a part-time dad, maybe a brother, a sister, maybe a cousin, and in my case, the next door neighbor down the street, a guy named Howard, who I'm still friends with. And those people have no knowledge whatsoever about creating high-performance people. None. Zero.
Okay. Good stuff. And much appreciate that, Dan. And it is certainly true that Dan and I met in 1993 at a J. Abraham seminar, and we were one of the few people that paid, we think few people, that paid $5,000. There were a lot of people that attended and didn't pay $5,000. And he's also correct that we've been in business together for a long time, and that was done on a handshake. As he said, and I want to say clearly too, I do not recommend that. Typically, handshake deals, you can't count on them. For us, that it didn't work out that way. We could count on them, but most of the time you can't. So don't copy that. We are certainly the exception to that model. So put it in writing, memorialize it, as Dan said. So now to the larger question. Do I believe people are born with their heads screwed on straight? So I want to tell you a few things about me that would tell you that I wasn't born with my head screwed on straight. Is that my mother died when I was 18 years old. That was tough. My brother died in a car accident when I was 22. I was a National Honor Society student in high school, never studied. It was easy. Went to Northeastern University in Boston, thought that it was the same thing. It wasn't. It was a tri-semester. First tri-semester, I got a 1.25, which is a D essentially. I said, that'll never happen again. I was right. Next semester, 1.0, then the next one 1.0 for a grand total of 1.083. They suggested that I leave Northeastern University, which I did. And I just didn't apply myself. I didn't apply the discipline that I should have, because previously it came too easy for me. That was a hard lesson, and that really was a wake-up call. So I flunked out of Northeastern University. It's my responsibility. I went and did a bunch of jobs, decided for the rest of my life I'm not going to say that I couldn't have completed that. So I went back to Northeastern. They agreed to take me back, and I did graduate, and kind of from there, you know a lot of the story after that. But my self-image certainly and self-esteem was not handed to me when I came out of the womb. That's something that I got beat up along the way, and those lessons are important. So one of the things that helped me a lot was my mother. She was a stiff upper lip Brit. She said, essentially, I'll paraphrase this, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade out of it. Don't be crying, don't be saying, woe is me. That was never part of my upbringing. So face what the problem is and just work the problem. But that doesn't mean that pretending something was painful didn't happen. It does mean that you never feel disappointed, angry, and discouraged to the point that you give up. You can feel those emotions, but realize it's all part of the process. So, adversity, however, does not necessarily make you stronger. You have to decide whether you turn and whether you step up or step off. And I was taught to step up, certainly. So the difference, I think, is how you respond to those things in your life. You will be faced with adversity. You will be faced with rejection. I just talked to one of the Hall of Famers, shortly before this video, and he said, yeah, those are the lessons you learn, and you have to learn them by going through them. You talking about them or Dan talking about them is different than experiencing those things. And I don't have a single successful mentee that wasn't tested sorely through that process leading to success. And I've talked about those examples before. So I certainly learned to accept responsibility, learn to make another decision, learn to figure out another way to do something, but not throw the towel in. And so that, I think, is where personal foundation begins. But Dan makes several points in that short clip and what follows it. So if you want to listen to that, go back to the Day 5, Part 1, and listen to it. But first, audit the people who are influencing you. You are who you hang around with. That's true. It's been said that you will become the composite of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, not only personality-wise, work ethic-wise, income-wise. So pick carefully on all of those. You are who you hang around with. And that may dictate that you change current relationships. And some of those are hard. Some of those can be family. Some of those can be lifelong friends, etc., etc. But if you are serious about doing this business acquisition, you're going to have to say, let me look at the relationships I have. And do those feed what I want to do? Or do those not? And that will also mean that if you want to learn this, that you learn this from people who have done this business acquisition, process, and also those who have been able to not only do it themselves, but teach others how to do it. That's the reason that Dan has a Hall of Fame. That's the reason that I have the Pantheon where the most successful people are. And I would encourage anyone to do the right things to get into that Pantheon. So you will have people, and family oftentimes fall into this category, that care about you and think that maybe this isn't worth it for you. Maybe you should take the safe route. Maybe you should get a job. Maybe you should do all these things. Well, they cannot relate usually to what you are doing. So take a look at those people. And again, those can be some pretty tough decisions. Okay. Second, keep starting to make promises to yourself. Make external commitments, how these things are going to impact other people, the calls you're going to make, the letters you're going to send, et cetera, et cetera. And then do those things, because every time you make an external execution commitment and complete it, you provide evidence to yourself that you can rely on yourself. The opposite of that is every time you make a commitment and you don't do it, you provide evidence that you don't follow through, that your word isn't worth what you would think it would be and should be. Okay? So start with some specific commitments to take action and go ahead and do that. And do it again and do it again. That evidence will build your self-esteem and self-image. And third, practice high-performance behavior before you are a high-performance person according to the evidence. You know, Dan talks about how you look, how you write, how you present yourself. You can only make a first impression once. In that clip, Dan said I look like a mortician. I don't know, maybe I do look like a mortician. But back in 1993, he said, you look like Mr. IBM. And that was a dark suit, white shirt, red tie, et cetera, et cetera. That is not how IBM dresses today. And that's probably the reason why he said looks like a mortician. So back in the 90s, if you can find those pictures, you're going to see, you know, that I did look like an IBMer and how they dressed back then. So, but those don't automatically appear, those skills. Those are skills that are developed over time. You have to know what to do, how to present yourself, how to prepare, all of those things. And so stop being intimidated by somebody's title. A lot of those people that you will be intimidated from or with or by end up saying, I wish I was doing what this guy did. Bankers, lawyers talk to successful people every day, and they've been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years, and they wish I had the guts to do what this kid is doing oftentimes. So when you wrap your head around that, you will begin to say, okay, you know, they are looking at me and with some envy, certainly. So remember that as you go forward. And then look at the process. The reason I created that motivation, discipline, action is that those are the cornerstones of success. Motivation gives you a compelling reason why you want to move forward and start. Discipline keeps you moving when the emotion and excitement disappears. There are times you're going to do things that you don't feel like doing. So that's the case, certainly. And pay attention to those times. And then action. Action produces the evidence that changes how you see yourself and what your self-image is and what your self-esteem is. So, was I born with my head screwed on straight? No, I don't think so. But is that something that you can learn from your experiences? 100% you can do that. So I worked on it then. I'm working on it still at the age of 73. So you can do the same. If you want an honest assessment of where you are now in this process, what you know, what you don't know, what you need to learn, go to askbrucewhipple.com, take that free test, take you less than 10 minutes. It'll identify for you the things that you need to do. And I want to add a couple other things that Dan may not have mentioned that are important as I see it. One, nobody does this by themselves. You need a team around you. This mentee that I just talked to, 45 minutes ago now or so, said, I never realized the value of a team until I got into these situations where those people's experience and questions, asking the hard discussions in either interview questions or acquisition situations, they ask things that I wouldn't have asked because of their experience. So teams get things done. You will rely on that team. You probably won't know who are going to be the superstars on that team in the beginning. You need to make some changes sometimes and make those changes. So that's important. I learned that in my corporate career. While I had an engineering degree, we called on engineering departments to sell. Yeah, I had an engineering degree, but there were manufacturing guys, quality guys, other engineers that were better than me. And I looked at those as tools in a toolbox and how to use them. You will find the same thing if you are successful at this. And then lastly, something that Dan gave me as a moniker a long time ago, never ask, never get. I consistently see that asking for something highly increases your odds of getting it. So I hope that helps. I hope that your head is becoming more screwed on, as Dan said. I, again, appreciate his comments. This is a process. This is not something that you flip a switch and it's done. You have to continually do the things that add to your self-image, add to your self-esteem. And if you do that, you will be, odds are, much more successful than those that don't. But you're going to get knocked around. Just understand that and push through that.